Have you ever wondered where the term hippie comes from and what it truly means? Let's take a journey back in time to uncover the roots of the hippie movement, a cultural revolution that redefined societal norms and values. The tale of the hippie movement begins with the Beat generation of the 1950s. A group of writers, thinkers, and artists, the Beats were the early pioneers of a countercultural lifestyle. They rejected mainstream values, choosing instead to explore alternative ways of living. Their ideas and works laid the groundwork for the hippie ethos. The term hippie is believed to have evolved from the word hipster, which was used to describe the Beats and their followers. But what was initially a term of derision soon became a badge of honor for those who dared to live outside the conventional norms. Among the luminaries of the Beat generation were authors like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. Their groundbreaking works, such as Kerouac's On the Road and Ginsberg's Howl, captured the spirit of rebellion and the longing for freedom that would later become the cornerstones of the hippie movement. Kerouac's spontaneous prose and Ginsberg's raw, emotional poetry resonated with the youth, inspiring them to question authority and seek their own paths. This craving for self-discovery and self-expression, coupled with a rejection of materialism and the status quo, fueled the rise of the hippie movement. The 1960s saw this countercultural wave surge across America and beyond. The hippie movement was more than just a trend or a phase. It was a dynamic response to the rigid societal norms of the time, a radical call for love, peace, and freedom that echoed through the decades. So, you see, the hippie movement didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was the result of a cultural shift that had been brewing for years. It was a revolution of thought, a rebellion against the mainstream, a yearning for a more authentic and meaningful way of life. And its legacy still resonates today, in our music, our art, and our collective consciousness. So, how did the hippie movement transition from a fringe lifestyle to a cultural phenomenon, you might ask? Well, let's take a step back to the 1960s, a decade steeped in a tumultuous blend of social unrest, political activism, and a thirst for change. The fabric of society was being pulled at all angles. Civil rights movements were shaking the nation, and the Cold War was keeping the world on edge. It was in this climate that the seeds of the hippie movement began to sprout. The counterculture, as it was known, was a reaction to the strict societal norms and expectations of post-war America. Young people were questioning the status quo, challenging the traditional paths set before them, and seeking a more authentic, meaningful existence. This newfound consciousness was heavily influenced by a myriad of sources, from the Beat generation's rebellious literature to the peaceful teachings of Eastern philosophies. In the mid-60s, San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district became the epicenter of this countercultural revolution. Here, thousands of young people congregated, drawn by a shared desire for peace, love, and freedom. The neighborhood became a vibrant tapestry of free-thinking individuals, each weaving their own unique threads into the larger movement. Two significant events in 1967, dubbed the Summer of Love and the Human Be-In, catapulted the hippie movement onto the global stage. The Summer of Love saw an influx of over 100,000 people into Haight-Ashbury, each seeking to experience the burgeoning cultural phenomenon firsthand. Meanwhile, the Human Be-In was a gathering in Golden Gate Park, where hippies, activists, and artists convened to promote love and unity. These events, broadcasted around the world, painted a vivid picture of a counterculture that was not just surviving but thriving. The 1960s were a time of great social change, and the hippie movement was at the forefront of this transformation. As we'll see in the next scene, the philosophies and lifestyles that underpinned this movement were as diverse and colorful as the people who embraced them. But what did it really mean to be a hippie? What did they believe in, and how did they live their lives? At the heart of the hippie movement lay three core principles: peace, love, and freedom. This trinity of ideals permeated every aspect of hippie culture, from their political activism to their vibrant music and art. Hippies sought to replace societal structures of control and coercion with communities based on mutual respect, understanding, and free expression. Their philosophy extended into their clothing and lifestyle. Rejecting the conformity of mainstream fashion, hippies donned colorful, handmade garments, often adorned with symbols of peace and love. Their style was a visual testament to their beliefs, a walking billboard of their countercultural ethos. But the hippie lifestyle was not just about fashion. It was about living in harmony with nature, embracing communal living, and exploring alternative forms of spirituality. Many hippies sought solace in Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism, seeing in them a path to inner peace and enlightenment away from the materialism of the West. A significant part of this exploration involved the use of psychedelic substances. Psychedelics like LSD were seen not as recreational drugs, but as tools for expanding consciousness and unlocking deeper understanding of the self and the universe. This was a deeply personal journey, a quest for truth and meaning in a world increasingly overshadowed by war and strife. Yet, it's essential to remember that the hippie movement was not a monolithic entity. It was a diverse tapestry of individuals, each with their own interpretation of what it meant to be a hippie. Some sought spiritual enlightenment, others social change, and still, others simply a life free from societal constraints. Being a hippie wasn't just about how you dressed or what you consumed. It was a way of life that challenged societal norms and sought to create a more peaceful and loving world. This desire for peace, love, and freedom wasn't a passing fad, but a profound shift in consciousness that would leave an indelible mark on the world. As with all cultural movements, the hippie movement eventually began to fade. But why did this happen, and what is their legacy today? During the late 70s, the hippie movement began to lose its steam. A number of factors contributed to this decline. The movement faced criticism and controversy from various quarters. Some saw it as a threat to societal norms and values, while others dismissed it as a naive and unrealistic quest for utopia. The use of psychedelic drugs, a key part of the movement's pursuit of altered consciousness, was not without its problems. It led to issues of addiction and mental health, contributing to the tarnishing of the movement's image. Furthermore, the end of the Vietnam War in 1975 removed a unifying cause that had galvanized the hippies. With the war's end, the urgency and relevance of the hippie movement began to dwindle. But what of the legacy of the hippies? Despite its decline, the movement left an indelible mark on society, music, and culture. The ethos of peace, love, and freedom continues to resonate in our attitudes and values. The hippie movement's emphasis on environmentalism and sustainable living is more relevant than ever in our current age of climate change and environmental crisis. In the realm of music, the influence of the hippies endures in the sounds and ethos of many genres. The spirit of Woodstock lives on in the countless music festivals held around the world every year. Moreover, we've seen a resurgence of the hippie lifestyle in different eras. The New Age movement of the 80s, the rave culture of the 90s, and the modern-day hipster phenomenon all bear the hallmarks of hippie influence. While the hippie movement may have declined, its influence is still felt today, from our music and fashion to our attitudes towards peace, love, and freedom. So, let's remember the hippies not as a failed social experiment, but as a movement that challenged us to imagine a world of peace, love, and freedom, and continues to inspire us to strive for that vision today. So, what have we learned about the hippie movement? A journey that began in the mid-20th century, the hippie movement emerged as a counterculture wave, challenging the established norms of society. Rooted in the desire for freedom, love, and peace, it was not just a fashion statement or a lifestyle choice. It was a philosophy of life that dared to question the status quo. The 1960s counterculture, characterized by a general distrust for the government and a desire to break away from societal constraints, provided the perfect backdrop for the rise of the hippie movement. The movement's core principles of love, peace, and freedom were reflected in their distinctive attire and style, which became a symbol of their rebellion against mainstream culture. Music, particularly psychedelic rock, played a pivotal role in expressing the ideals of the hippie movement. Iconic events like the Woodstock Festival epitomized the spirit of the movement, showcasing a sense of unity and community that transcended societal boundaries. Psychedelic experimentation became a common practice among hippies, used as a means to attain altered states of consciousness. Anti-war activism, particularly against the Vietnam War, and the formation of alternative communities further highlighted the hippies' pursuit of a peaceful, communal lifestyle. Despite facing criticisms and controversies, the hippie movement continued to evolve, exploring Eastern spiritual practices, advocating for gender equality, and influencing popular culture. While the movement began to decline in the late 1970s, its impact on society, music, and culture continues to resonate. The enduring legacy of the hippie movement is seen in its influence on pop culture, the resurgence of the hippie lifestyle in different eras, and the continued relevance of its values in contemporary culture. From art and expression to critiques of consumerism and materialism, the hippie movement has left an indelible mark on our world. The hippie movement was much more than just a cultural trend. It was a social revolution that continues to shape our world today.